Alright, so now your sharpening stones have been flattened and you're ready to start working on your chisels or whatever it is you're sharpening. I should warn you, once you start getting into sharpening and understanding the principles of it, pocket knives will never be the same again. Kitchen cutlery, all that stuff, you're going to start getting hooked on sharpening everything, which is better. You want to have sharp tools. This is an easy way to get into it. Okay, so flat stones. I have all three of the stones ready to go. I've got some water available. I need to make sure that this stone is going to stay in one place as I'm sharpening. You saw when I was using the granite plate, there was a little cafeteria style tray. That's a great way to manage any of the water that's going to happen when this thing spills over. This is my bench and it's been well used. Those trays are good, but I find that I like other methods for holding onto the stone while I'm working. So the first method here is a sharpening stone holder. This has an adjustable arm here. All of this is made with a relatively soft rubber. Put this into place, clamping these ends down. Once this is in place, it's difficult for this thing to start sliding around, and these are relatively inexpensive. These are like 20 bucks or something like that. What this doesn't do, however, is catch any of that water. This can be used in conjunction with that tray very easily, but now that whole tray is going to slide around, and there's methods for capturing that as well, but these stone holders work very, very well. The way that I've been doing it forever is I use just a simple bench hook. So that's what this thing is. Hook on the end here, goes down to the end. I have some screws holding this other hook down. Those screws extend just a little bit and it grabs onto the bench just very, very subtly. But that allows me enough grip so that I can start sharpening. Okay, so this is our chisel. Let me see that we're in focus. It's a fairly narrow chisel. This is like a 1/4 inch chisel. I would recommend starting with something maybe a little bit wider than this if this is your first time sharpening. Something in the neighborhood of a 1/2 inch is a great place that gives good width and has you a bit more control with the process. It's difficult to see, but there is a polish already on this chisel. And the thing that's nice about sharpening chisels and plane blades is once you have the back sharpened, you should never have to do it again. I'm doing it here just for demonstration purposes. It's usually only the bevel that will need to be resharpened or touched up occasionally or regularly, depending on the kind of work and the material you're using. Alright, so in flattening the back, I want to introduce the back of the chisel down to the sharpening stone. I want to do it controlled though. If I start trying to drop it straight down, I'm going to catch one of the edges or the cutting edge. None of those are going to be helpful in making this a flat surface. So what I'm going to do is tip this chisel back so that this point is sticking straight up in the air, then kind of roll it down. Now the entire back is captured into the sharpening stone. Once I've done that, just a series of back and forths. When I'm done, I want to reverse the process of how I introduce it. So I'll tip it right back, wipe any of this water off to see how I did, see where some scratches are. Then, in the interest of using the whole stone, I'm going to switch hands, go to the other side, do the same process. Hopefully you'll notice that my fingers are extended a little bit with where I'm applying pressure. My left hand in this case is still holding onto the chisel, but I'm holding as close to the sharpening stone as I possibly can. If I were to hold further out on the handle, I'm going to have a propensity to start tipping and rocking this tool into place, which is not going to help you get this thing flat. In a socket style format like this one is a Stanley Sweetheart, which I think are great chisels. You can remove the handle so that that temptation to hold out there is gone, and I'm really focusing the pressure on where it is I want. Sorry for the audio on that one. So what I'm watching for here is any irregularities. Let's see if I can get this engaged. Any irregularities here on the back. If there's a certain spot that's shinier than another, or if there is a little halo that's being created, high spots, low spots generally create those types of problems. If those do not exist, then I'm ready to go up to the next stone. And because, as I said, this chisel's already been sharpened, then I'm ready to do that. So, getting rid of this stone. That was the 800. Now I'm going to 1200. Still lots of water on this stone from last time. Dropping this thing down the same way I did before. So the trick with this, or the thing to keep in mind, is I want to use up as much of this stone as I possibly can when I'm sharpening. I don't need to put down an incredible amount of pressure or weight into the stone. I can't drive the metal into this stone. I just want to drag it across the surface. That's really where the benefit of this is. If I'm taking very small strokes here, then I'm going to start to dish that area very quickly, but I'm also losing some of that momentum that I would otherwise gain by exploring the whole stone. And I can really only see the back if I start clearing off as much of that sludge that I've created. Putting it back down, 2 fingers holding this thing down. The reason that I mentioned starting with a slightly wider chisel is because the narrower chisels, like 1/4 inch and smaller, they tend to roll in this application, especially if I'm trying to keep this chisel perpendicular to the stone. This is going to have a tendency of rolling and rounding these corners here and here. So you'll notice that I'm holding diagonally, and I'm really focusing downward pressure as much as I can on top of the metal. It's really tempting to have your fingers kind of straddle the metal to make sure it's a good way of getting feedback on what you're abrading on the stone. The thing of it is, you're going to start abrading your fingertips, and you won't really notice this until well into the process, and especially when you start washing your hands after all this is done. It's not going to feel like washing hands should. So just keep them on top of the metal as much as you can. Let me show you over here on the other side. If my middle finger here is kind of straddling that bevel, I can feel where the stone is, but I really want to be on top of the stone. I don't want my fingers at all, and certainly my fingertips, to engage in the sharpening stone. Not what they were designed for, and you will thank me if you could avoid that. Okay. Going through this process pretty quick because, again, this one's already been done. It's helpful for me when I sharpen to have a good light in front of me. So now on to the last grit, which is our 8000. I've also used 6000 as my final grit, and I just don't feel like I get the same quality of cutting edge as I do when I go that next step up to 8000. As I said before, I think anything above 8,000 is maybe extreme. I just don't know there's a lot of benefit for having that involved. So 8,000 is where we end it. Now at this point, with the 8,000, I should, when I look at the back of the chisel, or whatever it is I'm sharpening, I should be able to see a really beautiful polish. So in thinking about what these sharpening stones are doing, yeah, it looks pretty good. These stones are merely trying to create smaller and smaller scratches. It's not showing up. It's a little bit better. So I want to see a mirror polish on the back of this chisel. And the process here is that I'm just making smaller and smaller, finer and finer scratches that reflect light in a smaller wavelength. If I do that, then it creates this really beautiful polish and mirror, and the wood, when you cut it, will definitely see the benefits of that as well. The benefit of using finer stones when you sharpen, and you have to sharpen the back as well as the bevel, is it's like the difference of using a smooth edge to cut in the kitchen. So you have a kitchen knife that has one continuous edge versus a serrated blade that has lots of highs and lows. If we have lots of highs and lows here, it would cut fine, just like a serrated blade does in the kitchen, but we would have to cut in this type of a motion in order to see the benefit there. With chisels, we're only cutting in this orientation here. So if we have highs and lows cutting down in that motion, where those lows are, those valleys, those are going to get caught in the wood, and we're doing more tearing than we actually are severing the fibers. So it's critical that we get a good polish on this and work our way up through the grits. You will find when you get to this that, that you're going to spend more time on the lower grits. It's going to take more time to do the flattening and the correcting that should have been done at the manufacturer. But 800 you're going to spend the most amount of time on, a little bit less on the 1200, very little on the 8000 typically. And it's not uncommon to make it to either the 1200 or the 8000 and realize I still see highs and lows, and going back to the 800 and kind of starting over again. Don't lose faith, that's the process. It's the same for everybody. The good news is it only needs to be done once on your cutting edges. Once you've done it once, it's just a little bit of maintenance on the bevel, which we'll talk about in the next video.